who was born with my eyes blinded by the darkness of ignorance, offer my obeisances unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master, who has opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. So Krishna is unlimited, and Prabhupada says, he says, because they are unlimited, therefore we should not consider these statements to be mythological. There's a difference, Prabhupada is saying. They are factual, they're not mythological, but they're inconceivable. Krishna's pastimes are inconceivable. Actually, of course, this world is full of things which are inconceivable. But because they can, to some extent, be measured, we think that we understand the scientific mind, which always, I don't know, I just get sort of completely confused. I have a brother-in-law who's an avid scientist, and I've learned not really to enter into any profound discussion with him, because it becomes rapidly, I just get totally bamboozled. Because I think, how could anyone look upon life that, so far as I've understood, one or two friends or relatives who are scientifically minded. The scientific approach is, I want to measure everything. Then I can somehow feel I've understood it. That if there's anything out there in this world that we've not yet measured, let's measure it. And amazingly, huge sums of public money are made available so that scientists can famously smash atoms together, or smash what they call these quarks, and strange names that they have for Hobson's, no, what's the name?
Higgs boson.
Eh?
Higgs boson.
Higgs boson. Yeah, something like that. And so, they spend vast amounts of money smashing things together so that they can measure. There was even some space expedition was reported a year or two back. Did they send a rocket to Mars? And the plan was, well, we're going to smash it into the surface of Mars, just to see what happens. I mean, the mind boggles at the, what is the mentality behind that? It's no different really from a little child who's thinking, well, if I don't know, cut this worm in half, what will happen? Will it wriggle and writhe in agony, or will it just die on the spot, and so on? It's a very strange mentality which I've never entirely understood, but which apparently is quite common in this world, that somehow we have to bring everything within our conception. And so, of course, mathematics is a refined aspect of that, and some mathematicians have become devotees, so it's not that I wouldn't wish to cast aspersions on the mathematical mind, but it's all about numbers. And according to what I've heard, with the language of mathematics you can describe the known universe, and they do produce these huge equations that are supposed to be able to answer profound questions. But it rapidly becomes inconceivable. The human mind simply cannot conceive. We can't conceive of even the simplest thing. I can't conceive, actually, of how it is that I want to say these words down, and somehow the machine of my body is projecting these words. I can't conceive of how my thoughts are being turned into words, which are being projected into your ears and turning into, pictures in your mind. I don't know how that's happening. It's inconceivable. So therefore, if we can't conceive of simple things like speaking. Of course, a scientist will say, "Oh, we can all explain it all. The sound vibration, the voice box, and the waves in the air," and they will give a detailed description. But that's not telling me. That's not really helping me to understand how all this is happening. It's not. I'm sorry. I don't care. I mean, I read. I was trying to get to grips with evolution because somebody sent me a devotee sent me a manuscript in which he was attacking the theory of evolution. And I don't think he did it very well, to be honest, but I know his intention was good. So I thought, well, maybe I should need to, and I sent it to my son, because my son is quite scientific, mathematical in his approach to life. And I asked him, can you tell me, is this any good? I sent it to my sister too. She said, for heaven's sake, don't publish this, it's rot. But anyway, I sent it to him, and he said, if you think this is worth publishing, then you need to be educated, Dad. Here's a book about evolution. Read it. So I read a book about evolution, written by a man who believes in God, but he's a scientist. And he gave, instead of, how sometimes, I think we probably all encountered it, a sort of semi-educated, scientifically educated devotee giving a sort of a mock summary of what evolution is, and then, setting up the straw man, and then demolishing it and saying, see, it's not true. However, this book was different because he actually gave a very good summary of the science behind the whole theory of evolution. And I was becoming increasingly worried as I was reading it, something like, God, this all makes perfect sense. But then, towards the end, he began to go on to another level. And he began to say, but wait a minute, because actually, there's lots of things we think we understand these things, but there's lots of things we don't understand. And he began talking about quantum physics, which I knew nothing really of. But quantum physics, the example he gave is that, because materials, apparently solid materials, are actually made of atoms, and between the atoms, spaces. So he said, if you direct a flow of atoms at an apparently solid object, the atoms, of course, will bounce off, but some of them will pass through, apparently. And it's not possible to predict, which ones will pass through and which ones won't. It's completely random. So that was his way in. Of course, there were chapters about it, and it's all gone. I can't remember, but I just remember that was his way in to describing quantum physics, because quantum physics is trying to get to grips with the fact that actually, ultimately, you can't measure anything, because the whole of reality is fluid, and it's not at all as it appears to be. So then, in effect, having built this house of extraordinary, not cards, but like very solid building blocks that he had constructed through 80% of the book, describing the whole science behind the concept of evolution and demolishing the various arguments made against it by the fundamentalist Christian lobby in America. He then very expertly removed the bottom brick by pointing out that, in fact, we can never really know what's going on in reality, because it's so much beyond our conception. So therefore, if anyone wants to understand God, if we want to understand the spiritual world, we have to begin from the first point is, well, I never will be able to conceive of this. It's inconceivable. So the first thing I have to do is actually leave my intellect, really,